Have you ever thought a single flight could redefine your faith in kindness, justice, and integrity? Buckle up, because today's story will take you on a journey of heartbreak, resilience, and a twist so stunning you'll be left speechless. Meet Ebony Johnson, a strong-willed, pregnant black woman who only wanted to experience the joy of gazing at the clouds and horizon from her coveted window seat. Instead, she was denied that simple wish for so-called safety reasons. What happened next set off a chain of events that rattled an airline, caught the public's eye, and ignited a call for accountability no one saw coming. Ebony Johnson was a force of nature, the kind of person who could make a room come alive by simply walking into it. She was 6 months pregnant, and her radiant smile often lit up her face despite the ever-present ache in her feet. For Ebony, this pregnancy was nothing short of a miracle. Doctors had once told her that she might never conceive, so the journey of nurturing new life felt extraordinary. She took each day with grace and gratitude. Ebony lived in College Park, Georgia, just a stone's throw away from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. It was a vibrant, bustling area steeped in southern warmth and lively chatter. For Ebony, the airport was not just a gateway to new horizons, it was symbolic of life's possibilities. She grew up watching planes roar overhead, ferrying people to foreign lands and new adventures. That morning, Ebony woke up early to catch her flight to Chicago for her cousin's wedding. The excitement of family gatherings mingled with the simple pleasure she took in traveling. Her husband, Marcus Johnson, had left a sweet note by the bedside table, reminding her to stay hydrated. Marcus was already in Chicago, where he was helping Ebony's cousin set up some last-minute details at the wedding venue. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window of their cozy, sun-kissed bedroom. It was the day she hoped would be filled with promise and family joy. As Ebony prepared to leave, she smoothed a hand across her baby bump. The baby kicked in response, making her smile. "We're going to fly, little one," she whispered. "Just you and me, up there in the clouds." She had always insisted on a window seat whenever she traveled. That vantage point was her moment of solitude in the sky, where she could reflect on life, watch the scenery shift into soft clouds, and even catch a glimpse of the curvature of the earth, if she was lucky. She called a ride-share to the airport, greeted the driver politely, and gazed out the window at the crisp morning sunlight scattering over the city. Traffic was moderate, and she made good time. Her flight with Airline Airlines, a reputable carrier she had chosen for its comfortable seating and good customer reviews, was scheduled to depart at 10:30 a.m. Ebony had specifically booked a window seat in advance, paying extra for seat selection because she needed that sense of calm and reassurance while flying pregnant. Arriving at Hartsfield-Jackson, she marveled at the energetic swirl of travelers. Luggage wheels clacked over tiled floors, announcements buzzed overhead, and the smell of coffee drifted from bustling cafes. Everywhere she looked, people hurried to or from their gates, each with a story unfolding. Standing in that crowd, Ebony felt a sense of unity and possibility, like she was part of a greater tapestry of human journeys. She managed to navigate the check-in process smoothly, with a few kind employees nodding sympathetically at her obvious baby bump. It felt good to be seen, to be cared for in a small, fleeting way. When she arrived at her designated gate, Gate B27, Ebony found a seat near the large windows overlooking the tarmac. Planes took off and landed, their engines roaring like giant metallic birds. She checked her watch still an hour before boarding. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was Marcus, sending her a selfie from the wedding venue, flowers strewn in the background, grinning broadly. She felt a wave of affection and excitement. "It's all coming together," Marcus texted. "Just need my partner in crime here to perfect this day." Ebony smiled, typed back a quick response, and then settled into a short wait. She read the news on her phone, flipping between stories about local politics, entertainment, and travel tips for pregnant women. One article recommended selecting an aisle seat for frequent bathroom breaks, but Ebony had experienced no significant issues so far. Plus, the baby's movements seemed calmer when she was by the window. She whispered to her bump again, "We are going to sit by the window. It'll be peaceful, I promise." When the announcement came over the intercom that Orion Airlines Flight 457 to Chicago was now boarding, Ebony gathered her carry-on, double-checked her boarding pass, and joined the queue. Her flight was nearly full, but she was determined to board with plenty of time to settle in and get comfortable. A tall, slender flight attendant with neatly braided hair stood at the entrance to the plane, greeting passengers. Her name tag read Katrina. Ebony noticed how the woman's smile faltered slightly as Ebony approached. She wondered if she had imagined it maybe Katrina was just tired. "Good morning," Ebony said, returning the smile. Katrina nodded, scanning her boarding pass. "Thank you, Miss Ebony Johnson, seat 15A. Head left, and it's about halfway down the aisle on your right." Ebony offered a polite nod and continued. The airplane aisle was crowded, but she inched her way toward 15A. She spotted it, a window seat, just as she'd requested. Relief washed over her. Then a different flight attendant in a crisp uniform, with piercing blue eyes and a name badge that read Tom, stepped in front of her. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, holding up a hand. "I am going to need to check your boarding pass again." Ebony paused, feeling a flicker of confusion. She held out her ticket without fuss. Tom took a moment to examine the pass, pursed his lips, and then said, "Actually, you'll have to sit in an aisle seat for safety reasons." "What do you mean?" Ebony replied. She kept her voice polite but firm. "I booked and paid extra for a window seat. This is my seat, 15A. Tom didn't budge." "Ma'am, Orion Airlines policy requires passengers with special conditions like advanced pregnancy to sit where they can have easier access to the aisle. It's for your own safety." Her heart started pounding. She had never heard of such a policy, and she certainly hadn't been told when she booked the ticket. Nobody at check-in mentioned it. "I'm not in advanced pregnancy," Ebony protested. "I'm only 6 months along, and my doctor cleared me to fly. There's no reason I can't sit by the window." A few passengers were waiting behind Ebony, and a hush fell over the immediate area. Eyes began to turn toward the confrontation. Some looked curious, others sympathetic or awkward. Tom's posture stiffened. "Mr. AM, I'm sorry, but you need to move. We have another seat for you in 15C. It's an aisle seat." Ebony glanced at 15C. Someone else was already settling there. This was turning chaotic. "There's no reason for me to move," Ebony insisted, trying to keep her temper in check. "No one said anything at check-in. I've flown before while pregnant. This has never been an issue." Another flight attendant approached Katrina, the one who had greeted Ebony at the plane's entrance. She glanced at Ebony's boarding pass again. "Tom, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked quietly, pulling him aside. Ebony overheard fragments of their hushed conversation, not an actual policy, never had to enforce. Seat was purchased. The tension in Ebony's chest grew. She felt eyes on her, the throbbing swirl of a humiliating moment. She swallowed hard. Her feet ached. Her belly felt heavy, and she wanted nothing more than to sit down. "Please," she said, addressing Katrina, "I need to sit. I booked 15A for a reason." Katrina looked sympathetic, but before she could respond, Tom swooped back into the conversation. "Listen, ma'am, we're telling you it's not safe. If you'd kindly relocate to the aisle seat, that's the best we can do. If you don't want to comply, you may have to be escorted off the aircraft." Ebony's eyes widened. "Escorted off? For wanting to sit in my assigned seat?" A chorus of murmurs rose from nearby passengers. One of them, an older gentleman in a business suit, leaned forward and said, "She paid for that seat. Let her have it." Another passenger aimed their phone camera in Ebony's direction, likely recording. The swirl of tension built. Ebony felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back, drawing herself upright. She had to maintain her composure. She refused to let the moment break her. Tom's expression hardened further. "We can't allow passengers with special needs to block the window exit. This isn't an exit row," Ebony interjected, exasperated. "It's just a regular window seat." A flurry of confusion and anxious chatter ensued. Katrina attempted to defuse the situation, but Tom stood his ground, and Ebony felt her voice tightening with indignation. Finally, Ebony asked calmly, "Is this because I'm pregnant, or is this because I'm black? Which one is it?" "Because you're not making sense." Gasps erupted. Tom's cheeks colored. "This is an FAA guideline," he began, but he was cut off by another passenger pointing out, "The FAA never said pregnant women can't sit at the window." The murmurs grew louder, some passengers calling out that Ebony should be allowed to sit down, others standing up in the aisle, obviously upset by the delay. Within minutes, a flight supervisor arrived. The supervisor was a short man with salt and pepper hair who introduced himself as Neil. He asked Ebony to step aside momentarily. She complied, mindful that she did not want to escalate the situation if there was any way to avoid it, but her knees trembled slightly from a mix of anger, embarrassment, and exhaustion. While Ebony waited, more of the conversation was lost in the bustle. Suddenly, Neil approached her, holding a new boarding pass. "Miss Johnson," he said, "I'm going to reseat you. It's not the seat you purchased, but we do have an aisle seat in the same row. If you refuse, we'll have to consider removing you from this flight. We have to think of your safety." Ebony's hand shook as she took the new pass. Her cheeks burned. She could barely speak. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll take it up with the airline after I land." She just wanted to get to Chicago for her cousin's wedding. She wanted to avoid a bigger scene. She felt the baby kick almost as if in protest, and she placed a protective hand over her abdomen. Neil pressed his lips together in a thin line. "Thank you for your cooperation." As Ebony made her way to the seat, the looks from fellow passengers ranged from supportive to apologetic. Some offered words of solidarity, but it didn't quell the raging sense of injustice she felt. She sank into the aisle seat, tears threatening to break free. She retrieved her phone and typed out a quick post on social media. "Denied my purchased window seat for being pregnant. Told it's for my safety." Still in disbelief, she was too upset to type more. Settling her phone onto airplane mode as instructed, she tried to steady her breathing. Her hands cradled her belly. She looked over at the window seat she was forced to give up. It remained empty for a moment, until another passenger slid in quietly, avoiding eye contact. Ebony swallowed her anger. The flight itself passed in a blur of emotions. Ebony tried to calm down, but her mind wouldn't let go of the humiliation. She nibbled on the small snack Orion Airlines provided, sipped water, and avoided looking at Tom or anyone else. Katrina stopped by at one point, quietly whispering, "I'm sorry about earlier." Ebony managed a tight smile. "It's not your fault," she said softly. When the plane landed in Chicago, Ebony felt a wave of relief. She just wanted to put the ordeal behind her, focus on her cousin's wedding, and enjoy some long overdue family time. Yet a part of her seethed at the injustice. She vowed to file a formal complaint and demand a refund for the seat she had paid extra for. Marcus greeted her at baggage claim with open arms and a beaming smile, but his face fell the moment he saw Ebony's distress. "What's wrong?" he asked, a note of alarm in his voice. Before she could respond, Ebony's phone buzzed incessantly. She fished it out of her purse to see an avalanche of notifications. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers had begun responding to her short social media post about the seat denial. Some were outraged, some curious, and some dismissive. But it was the outpouring of support that overshadowed everything else. She blinked in surprise. She hadn't anticipated the post would go viral. People were tagging news outlets, including local Atlanta stations and even a few national platforms. Ebony Johnson, can you elaborate on what happened? This is unacceptable discrimination. I hope that Airline gets sued. Message after message poured in. Marcus's eyes widened as she explained the situation. He immediately suggested, "We should talk to your OB-GYN, get a note clarifying your fitness to fly, and then contact Orion Airlines for a formal complaint. You deserve an apology." Ebony nodded. "I will. But first, let's get to the hotel." They tried to focus on the upcoming wedding festivities, but Ebony found her phone lighting up repeatedly with requests for interviews and calls for more details. She texted back a polite decline, wanting to wait until after the wedding to handle the media inquiries. That evening, surrounded by the laughter of family in a well-decorated banquet hall, Ebony tried to be present in the joy of the moment. Her cousin looked radiant in her wedding gown, the dance floor was alive, and the feast was abundant, but Ebony couldn't shake off the hurt and anger. Despite her determination to stay in the moment, her mind replayed the humiliating scene on the plane. Ebony's phone exploded with more notifications the next morning. Major social media influencers had picked up her story. They highlighted how airlines often misinterpret guidelines or create policies that border on discrimination. Ebony saw hashtags emerging, hashtag let us sit, hashtag pregnant and proud, hashtag seat for all. National news sites like CNN and NBC posted short bulletins about a pregnant passenger claiming seat discrimination on an Orion Airlines flight. Then a local Atlanta news station published an interview with a fellow passenger who had captured a few crucial seconds of Ebony's confrontation with Tom on video. The clip showed Ebony calmly stating she had purchased a window seat, while Tom insisted she move to an aisle seat. In the background, other passengers' voices rose in Ebony's defense. The footage ended right before Ebony was threatened with removal from the flight. Public outrage gathered momentum. People began sharing personal stories of airline discrimination. From wheelchair users to parents traveling with small children, it seemed Ebony's post had struck a nerve. Despite her vow to keep a low profile until after the wedding, Ebony found herself fielding phone calls from press outlets. She gave one short interview to a local Chicago journalist, clarifying that she had not broken any airline rules, had clearance from her doctor, and had never been informed of any special seat restriction. "I don't want retribution," she said in the interview. "I just want an apology and to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." When the interview aired, Ebony had no idea it would ignite even more attention. Overnight, her social media following ballooned from a modest circle of friends to thousands of people, many of them outraged at what they saw as blatant discrimination. Some tagged government agencies like the Department of Transportation. Others demanded that Orion Airlines issue a public statement and rectify the situation. As Ebony scrolled through the messages, she saw a mix of unwavering support and trolls accusing her of seeking attention. She bristled at the hateful comments. Some claimed she was lying, others made racist remarks. Still, the majority were supportive, echoing her call for accountability. This blend of encouragement and vitriol churned in her stomach, making her pregnancy nausea flare. A few days later, Ebony's flight back to Atlanta approached. She and Marcus discussed whether to remain on Orion Airlines or switch to another carrier. Though Ebony had enough miles with Orion to secure a discounted ticket, she felt hesitant to trust them again. But since she needed to get home promptly, she chose to keep her ticket rather than start a complicated last-minute change. She checked in online, noticing her seat assignment was again an aisle seat, this time 20C. She tried to change it to a window seat, but the system wouldn't allow it. A pop-up message read, "We cannot fulfill your seat request at this time." Ebony scowled at the screen. Was it a glitch or intentional? On the morning of the return flight, Ebony opened her email to see a message from Orion Airlines. The subject line read, "Regarding your recent seat issue official statement." Her pulse quickened as she clicked it open. The email was short and coldly formal. "Dear Miss Johnson, thank you for contacting Orion Airlines. We have reviewed your claim regarding seat denial on Flight 457. Our policies are designed with passenger safety as our top priority. In certain cases involving passengers with special accommodations or conditions, we reserve the right to assign seats that allow for swift and safe evacuation if necessary. While we understand your dissatisfaction, our preliminary review finds that the flight crew acted in accordance with our guidelines. No further action is warranted at this time. Sincerely, Customer Relations Department, Orion Airlines." Ebony's hand shook with anger. She had asked for a refund of the seat fee she paid and a public apology. Instead, she got a statement that implied she was some kind of safety risk. "They're doubling down," she muttered. Marcus, reading over her shoulder, placed a reassuring hand on her back. "This is just the beginning," he said. "They'll regret brushing this off when so many people know what really happened." Ebony clenched her fists. She felt the baby shift, as if sensing her agitation. She took a deep breath. "I won't let this go," she said, "but I have to be careful. Stress isn't good for the baby." Shortly before Ebony and Marcus headed to the airport, Ebony made a short statement on her social media platforms. She posted the airline's email and wrote, "Orion Airlines has decided my pregnancy is a special condition that makes me unsafe to sit by a window, even though my doctor cleared me to fly. They've refused to refund my seat fee or issue a genuine apology. I won't be silenced. I'll keep speaking out until they recognize that discriminating against a pregnant black woman, or anyone for that matter, is unacceptable." Let us sit within hours. The post garnered thousands of likes, shares, and comments. Ebony's name started trending regionally, and more national news outlets picked up her story. Prominent civil rights organizations expressed outrage. Women's advocacy groups rallied behind her, condemning Orion Airlines for perpetuating what they called systemic bias against pregnant women of color. Public relations experts weighed in on news segments, calling Orion Airlines' response a textbook example of crisis mismanagement. Despite the swirling chaos, Ebony and Marcus traveled to O'Hare International Airport. Ebony felt tense checking in, half expecting a repeat of the fiasco. To her surprise, the Orion Airlines representative at the ticket counter politely handed over their boarding passes with no mention of Ebony's pregnancy. The flight itself was uneventful. Ebony, stuck again in the aisle seat, tried to keep calm. She was too tired for another argument. At least she was heading home. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Orion Airlines corporate offices buzzed with frantic meetings. Public outcry had reached a pitch that was damaging the airline's reputation. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Hashtags calling for a boycott of Orion Airlines gained traction. Shareholders demanded explanations. Local news cameras camped outside Orion Airlines headquarters in Dallas, Texas, capturing any employee who ventured outside. At the helm of Orion Airlines was CEO Nicholas Wallace, a businessman known for his no-nonsense approach and willingness to make tough calls. He had guided the airline through turbulent economic times, but never had he faced such a widespread PR disaster. Wallace prided himself on boosting Orion's public image through philanthropic gestures, sponsoring educational programs and environmental initiatives. But that image now teetered on the brink of collapse, overshadowed by Ebony's story. Wallace sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room with his executive team. He rubbed his temple in frustration as the head of PR, Sarah Montgomery, detailed the crisis. We're receiving thousands of complaints daily. Our phone lines are jammed. We're losing future bookings. People are posting pictures of their cut-up Orion Airlines credit cards. Wallace glared. How did this happen? He demanded. Why was she forced to move from the seat she paid for? An uncomfortable silence fell. Sarah hesitated. It seems one of our flight attendants cited a non-existent policy. Possibly confusion with the guidelines for exit row seats or passengers with limited mobility. But Miss Johnson was neither in an exit row nor assigned mobility assistance. Our flight attendant insisted it was a safety concern for pregnant women to sit at a window. Wallace let out a scoffing laugh. That's ridiculous. Who gave them that impression? Sarah shook her head. We're investigating. Tom, the flight attendant, claims he was acting on instructions from a flight supervisor who misunderstood internal memos. Katrina says she tried to correct him, but he wouldn't listen. Wallace slammed a hand on the table, and now we have a viral fiasco. Instead of apologizing and refunding her seat fee, we dug our heels in. Unbelievable. The executive team exchanged worried glances. Then Sarah said, Miss Johnson wants a refund, an apology, and a public statement that clarifies the airline's stance. She's also raising awareness about how pregnant travelers, especially women of color, face discrimination. The conversation has escalated into a discussion of systemic racism. Wallace turned to the head of legal, a solemn-faced man named Robert Lang. What are the legal implications? Lang shrugged. Public relations nightmare aside, there could be an argument for discrimination if it's proven that she was treated differently because of her race or pregnancy. We might be looking at a potential lawsuit or an investigation by the Department of Transportation. Wallace steepled his hands. He was known for decisive action. Fine, we issue a statement, apologize, offer her compensation. Let's close this down. But Sarah hesitated. We already gave an official response claiming that the crew acted according to guidelines. Wallace frowned deeply. You want us to double down on that statement? That'll destroy our credibility. We're looking incompetent at best and downright racist at worst. No, we need a bold move. Sarah nodded slowly, relief washing over her face. She hated the corporate spin that had been forced out earlier. Yes, Mr. Wallace, a direct, heartfelt apology could help. But we might need something more concrete. Wallace stood up. Get me Ebony Johnson's contact information. I'll speak to her personally. Let's see if we can salvage this. Ebony had just returned home in Atlanta when she received a surprising phone call from an unknown number. She picked up, expecting perhaps another reporter or an automated spam. Instead, a rich baritone voice spoke. Hello, may I speak to Miss Ebony Johnson? This is Ebony, she replied cautiously. Miss Johnson, this is Nicholas Wallace, CEO of Orion Airlines. Ebony's heart skipped a beat. Why would the CEO call her directly? She steadied her voice. Mr. Wallace? He exhaled. I'd like to sincerely apologize for your experience on our flight. The way you were treated does not reflect Orion Airlines values. I would appreciate an opportunity to meet with you in person and discuss how we can make this right. She hesitated, suspecting a PR stunt, but the sincerity in his voice gave her pause. I'm open to talking, she finally said. I'm not interested in empty promises, though. Wallace assured her this was no mere gesture. They arranged a meeting at Ebony's convenience. She suggested a coffee shop near her home, wanting a public place where she felt safe and had control over how long the meeting lasted. When Ebony arrived at the cafe, she spotted a tall, distinguished man with neatly combed silver hair, wearing a tailored suit, standing near the entrance with two other individuals, likely security or personal assistants. Despite the serious aura around him, Wallace wore a warm smile as Ebony approached. She felt her stomach tighten, uncertain what to expect. "Miss Johnson," he greeted, extending a hand. Ebony nodded politely, noticing cameras across the street. Some news outlet must have caught wind of the meeting. She ushered the CEO inside, guiding them to a quiet table in the corner. Marcus stayed by her side, his expression guarded. Wallace launched into an apology, explaining that the flight attendant's actions were inexcusable and that Ebony should never have been forced out of her paid seat. He acknowledged that Orion Airlines' initial response was a mistake. It was misguided corporate damage control, he admitted. "I take full responsibility." Ebony listened quietly. She appreciated the candor, but words alone weren't enough. "Your flight attendant, Tom, insisted I move for safety reasons." This was humiliating. And then your customer service email added insult to injury. Where did this non-existent policy come from? Why double down on it? Why was my pregnancy singled out? Wallace looked uncomfortable. "We investigated the incident thoroughly. It seems Tom was confused by some outdated notes meant for passengers with severe mobility restrictions. Unfortunately, that confusion led to discriminatory behavior on his part. As for the corporate response, it was a massive internal miscommunication. We relied on incomplete information." "I'm not making excuses, only explaining how we ended up here," Ebony sighed. "So, what now? We'd like to offer you a full refund for your flight, plus compensation for the distress caused." Ebony opened her mouth to speak, but Wallace raised a hand gently. "We also want to implement new training programs for all Orion Airlines staff on anti-discrimination, particularly regarding race and pregnancy. We intend to partner with advocacy groups to ensure this training is meaningful, not just for show." Ebony exchanged a glance with Marcus, seeing a flicker of cautious optimism in his eyes. She turned back to Wallace. "That's a start," she said, "but a large part of this is also about accountability. I don't want someone else to go through what I did. We need clarity on your policies, so flight attendants don't get to invent guidelines on the spot." Wallace nodded. "I agree. We're going to revise and publicly post all seat-related policies for pregnant passengers. We're going to highlight that pregnant women can choose any seat they like unless a doctor specifically advises otherwise. And if there's any concern, it must be handled discreetly and respectfully." Ebony leaned back, feeling a wave of relief. The conversation ended with Wallace promising to issue a public apology and to speak openly about the changes Orion Airlines plan to make. "If you have no objections," he added, "I'd like to hold a press conference tomorrow in Atlanta to address the public. I'd love for you to join me if you're comfortable." News of the upcoming Orion Airlines press conference spread like wildfire. The public was eager to see if the company would attempt to salvage its image or authentically own up to the situation. Ebony was nervous. She appreciated Wallace's seeming sincerity, but the spotlight had grown uncomfortably bright. The next morning, Ebony arrived at the designated hotel conference room. Cameras, reporters, and microphones jammed the space. Wallace's PR team ushered Ebony to a seat beside the podium. She spotted a few of her supporters in the audience, holding signs like "Pregnancy is not a handicap." Meanwhile, her phone buzzed with messages from friends, urging her to stay strong. Nicholas Wallace took the podium, clearing his throat. "Thank you all for being here. My name is Nicholas Wallace, CEO of Orion Airlines. I'd like to begin by apologizing to Miss Ebony Johnson and all those who've been hurt or angered by her recent experience on Flight 457. We failed Miss Johnson both in the moment she was forced to move from her purchased seat and in our subsequent corporate response." He paused, scanning the crowd. "We at Orion Airlines realize this incident underscores deeper issues, how pregnant women, particularly women of color, are sometimes subjected to discriminatory practices under the guise of safety or policy. We have to do better. Effective immediately, we are launching a comprehensive review of all our policies related to passenger accommodations. We will be partnering with the Women's Aviation Advocacy Network and the NAACP to overhaul our training modules. Discrimination will not be tolerated in any form. Wallace turned to Ebony with a respectful nod. Miss Johnson, the first am publicly and personally apologizing to you. Our flight attendants' actions were unacceptable. Our initial corporate stance only added insult. Today, I commit to making sure no other passenger experiences such treatment on Orion Airlines. A wave of applause broke out in the room. Cameras flashed. Ebony felt a swirl of emotions, relief, gratitude, and still a lingering sense of wariness. She stood and joined Wallace at the podium, her heart pounding. She cleared her throat. I appreciate the apology and these promised changes. My goal was never to tear down Orion Airlines, but to ensure no one else is humiliated as I was. Let this be a lesson to all companies. Sincerity in addressing discrimination is crucial. It's not enough to have a policy. You must uphold fairness and dignity for everyone. The crowd erupted in cheers again, reporters shouting questions. Ebony felt a flash of confidence. She had faced her fear, demanded accountability, and was seeing results. Then came the unexpected moment. A reporter from a major network raised her voice over the din. Mr. Wallace, is it true that your flight attendant Tom was fired over this incident? The room fell silent. Wallace glanced at Ebony, then answered, Tom has been suspended pending a thorough investigation. We have not made a final decision yet. The reporter persisted. Our sources indicate Tom claims he was just following orders. Do you deny that instruction came from higher up? A hush rippled through the room. Ebony's heart pounded. She recalled how Tom had mentioned something about FAA guidelines that day. Was it possible someone else at Orion had fed him misinformation? The tension was palpable as Wallace responded. We're still investigating. I cannot comment on an ongoing personnel matter in detail. Suffice to say, we are rectifying the root cause, not just punishing an individual. Just as Ebony thought the air might clear, a man wearing a pilot's uniform stood up in the back and shouted, "This is a cover-up!" Gasps scattered through the audience. The man continued, I work for Orion Airlines. We all got that memo from management about limiting pregnant passengers in certain seats. They want to minimize medical risks. Mid-flight told us to keep them close to the aisle. Tom isn't the only one who followed that directive. A wave of chaos descended. Reporters rushed toward the man, demanding clarity. Camera flashes lit up the scene. Wallace's face went pale. The pilot brandished a printed piece of paper, claiming it was the internal memo. Ebony's stomach twisted. Could it be that Wallace's apology was built on half-truths? Wallace motioned to security to calm the scene, but the moment was out of control. Dozens of questions ricocheted around the room. Did you issue such a memo? Is Ebony's case just the tip of the iceberg? How many other pregnant women were denied seats? Ebony stood frozen, uncertain what to believe. Wallace had seemed genuine, but this new revelation cast doubt. Had the airline truly set a policy to keep pregnant women from window seats? The press conference dissolved into chaos. Wallace's PR team hastily ended the session. Ebony was whisked away by security, and Marcus, her heart in her throat. In the hotel's back corridor, Ebony turned to Wallace, eyes blazing. Is that memo real? She demanded. Wallace shook his head vehemently. I've never approved any memo instructing staff to limit pregnant passengers to aisle seats. This is news to me. Marcus stepped between them. Then why is a pilot shouting about it at your press conference? Why does he have a printed document? Sarah Montgomery, the head of PR, raced to them, panting slightly. We're verifying the authenticity of the memo. It might be an old draft someone circulated. Or It could be fake. We had an internal conversation months ago about pregnant passengers who are near term. But the official stance was always, if a passenger is fit to fly, they choose their seat. Ebony's mind spun. She recalled how Tom insisted he was just following guidelines. Did some manager distort the message? Wallace inhaled deeply. Miss Johnson, I'm still committed to doing the right thing. Let me get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, you have my word, our public apology stands, and we will expedite the policy overhaul. None of that changes. Ebony studied his expression. He seemed genuinely taken aback. I hope you're telling the truth, she said quietly, her voice trembling from the intensity of it all, because the world is watching. Over the next week, Orion Airlines found itself at the center of a media storm. A leaked memo circulated online, titled Guidelines for Pregnant Passengers Risk Management, dated 6 months prior. The language within suggested that pregnant passengers beyond the second trimester be strongly advised to select aisle seats for prompt access to medical services if needed. It was not an explicit rule, but it warned flight attendants, in any dispute, prioritize safety. If necessary, reassign seats. Public sentiment exploded. Some argued the memo had good intentions, but was phrased poorly, leaving room for abuse. Others felt it was outright discriminatory, painting pregnant women as liabilities. Ebony watched the saga unfold on news programs, her name still central in the headlines. Even though she had received a personal apology and promise of compensation, the broader question loomed: how many other pregnant women had faced or would face similar discrimination? Wallace launched a thorough internal investigation. HR emails, training records, and manager communications were scoured. The airline's legal team scrambled to address the wave of lawsuits and complaints from other pregnant passengers who claimed they, too, were harassed or reassigned seats without justification. In a stunning twist, it turned out the memo had indeed originated within Orion Airlines, but had never been officially cleared by top leadership. The directive came from an overzealous risk management director named Anita Pierce. She had drafted it after hearing about a lawsuit involving another airline where a pregnant passenger had gone into labor mid-flight. Fearing liability, Pierce crafted an internal guideline that flight crews misinterpreted as an official mandate to override seat selections. When confronted, Pierce admitted to emailing the memo to department heads, but said she did not intend for it to be enforced so rigidly. The fiasco now placed her role in jeopardy. Orion Airlines faced a meltdown of internal trust, as employees realized how easily an unofficial memo could cause real-world harm. As the investigation concluded, Wallace took the extraordinary step of firing Anita Pierce for drafting and circulating a document with discriminatory undertones that had not been approved by the executive team. Multiple managers who had enforced the memo as if it were official policy were also disciplined or let go. Tom, the flight attendant who first confronted Ebony, was offered reinstatement after a suspension provided he underwent extensive retraining. However, Tom publicly refused, saying the damage to his reputation was too great, but the fallout didn't end there. Orion Airlines faced a severe drop in bookings, and their stock value plummeted nearly 20% over the course of several weeks. Loyal customers cancelled flights, citing distrust. Shareholders grew restless. Some demanded that Wallace step down, accusing him of not having tighter control over internal processes. The airline's brand, once seen as progressive and community-focused, became synonymous with chaos and discrimination in the public eye. Meanwhile, Ebony tried to resume her normal routine. She had doctor's appointments to attend, baby clothes to pick out, and a nursery to decorate. But her quiet life was continually disrupted by phone calls and emails from lawyers, activists, and fellow passengers who had stories of their own. She realized this incident, though personally harrowing, had become a catalyst for a broader movement. In the end, Ebony retained a civil rights attorney to ensure Orion Airlines followed through on its promises. Although Ebony initially just wanted an apology, she recognized that real change often required legal pressure. The lawsuit that followed forced Orion Airlines to settle with Ebony for a significant amount, part of which she donated to organizations supporting pregnant women facing travel discrimination. More importantly, the settlement included binding agreements for policy revisions, staff training, and annual audits by an independent agency. Despite the turmoil, Ebony discovered a newfound sense of purpose. She became an advocate for fair treatment of pregnant travelers. Invited by non-profit groups, she spoke at conferences and joined panels discussing airline policies. She shared her story how a single flight turned her into a reluctant figurehead for change. Marcus stood by her side, supporting her through waves of public scrutiny. Sometimes Ebony felt overwhelmed, missing the quiet life she once had. But then she remembered the humiliation of being forced to relinquish her seat for no valid reason. She recalled the feeling of being both pregnant and black in a society too quick to label her as a risk. That memory fueled her resolve. One afternoon, Ebony received a handwritten letter. The envelope bore the Orion Airlines logo. She recognized Wallace's signature at the bottom. He expressed gratitude for her courage, admitting the changes at Orion Airlines wouldn't have happened without her persistent stand. He wrote, "We were forced to confront our shortcomings. Sometimes real change happens only through discomfort. Thank you for not giving up." For Ebony, the letter felt like a small but significant testament that her stand had resonance. A few days later, a news piece aired showcasing Orion Airlines' new training regimen. The segments highlighted flight attendants in simulations, learning how to properly address pregnant passengers without making assumptions. Ebony smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope that perhaps real progress was happening. 6 months later, Ebony gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Aurora, a nod to new beginnings, the glow of dawn. During her maternity leave, Ebony watched as Orion Airlines continued to roll out changes. The airline's reputation began to stabilize. Passengers posted on social media about kinder, more understanding flight attendants. Ebony heard from other pregnant travelers who said that, thanks to Ebony's ordeal, staff were now more cautious about seat reassignments. Nicholas Wallace still faced challenges. The board of directors was split on whether to keep him. Some believed his leadership was tarnished. Others argued he had shown accountability and made amends. In the end, the board voted to let him remain, but with strict oversight and new mandates for transparency. Tom, the flight attendant, remained jobless. He had threatened to sue Orion Airlines, claiming he was scapegoated. Yet the airline's legal team stood firm, presenting evidence that Tom had escalated the situation with Ebony unnecessarily. Public sympathy for Tom was minimal. Many believed he should have listened to Ebony and rechecked the guidelines rather than threatening to remove her from the plane. As for Ebony, she found her life forever changed. She had taken a stand, endured public scrutiny, and emerged stronger. Even as she cared for baby Aurora, Ebony balanced her role as a new mother with activism. Her social media channels became a hub for travelers seeking advice on how to advocate for themselves against airline policies that seemed arbitrary or unfair. In a heartfelt moment of closure, Ebony, Marcus, and Aurora were invited to a special unveiling at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Orion Airlines sponsored a new nursing and pregnant traveler lounge, complete with comfortable seating, medical supplies, and privacy for nursing mothers. A plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to Ebony Johnson and all travelers who dare to speak up for their rights. May no journey be overshadowed by discrimination." Tears pricked Ebony's eyes as she read the words. Marcus pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, and Aurora cooed in her arms. A group of reporters documented the unveiling. Wallace was present, offering a subdued smile of respect from a distance. Ebony gave him a nod of acknowledgement. The lounge, with its soothing colors and open design, stood as a concrete testament to the power of accountability. Ebony understood that symbolic gestures weren't everything. Systemic change required vigilance, but she allowed herself this moment to appreciate how far they had come. Months later, Ebony and Marcus planned a trip to visit Marcus's family in California. They booked with Orion Airlines, deciding to see if the airline's reforms truly held up. Ebony felt a knot of anticipation in her stomach as she stepped into the check-in line, Aurora sleeping peacefully in a carrier strapped to Ebony's chest. To her surprise, the ticket agent recognized her name and smiled widely. "Miss Johnson, welcome back. We have you in a window seat, just as requested, and we also have an infant bassinet if you need it." Ebony blinked, momentarily stunned. "That's perfect," she finally managed. A wave of emotion washed over her: relief, gratitude, and a touch of pride. She was grateful for small acts of kindness that signaled bigger shifts beneath the surface. On board, the flight attendants helped Ebony settle into her seat and stow her carry-on. Nobody questioned her ability to sit at the window. Nobody cited a spurious policy about pregnant women or medical risk. Though Ebony was no longer pregnant, she could sense the difference in staff demeanor. It was a gentle courtesy that left her feeling at ease. Looking out the window as the plane ascended, Ebony felt a familiar awe at the sight of clouds rolling beneath her. She smiled at Aurora, who fussed softly, then drifted back to sleep. Marcus squeezed her hand, whispering, "We made it." She exhaled slowly. Memories of her ordeal flickered in her mind, but they no longer triggered raw anger. Instead, they reminded her of her own strength and the unexpected allies who had come to her side. She reflected on the many people who had stood up for her that day on the plane, the passengers who'd spoken up in real time, and the countless voices online who amplified her story. Yes, Ebony Johnson was just one passenger among millions flying each day, but sometimes it only takes one voice to spark a movement. Gazing out at the horizon, she felt a profound gratitude. Her fight was not over, but the scars had shaped a woman who refused to be silent, and an airline that had glimpsed the cost of prejudice. As the plane soared onward, Ebony closed her eyes, her thoughts drifting to the future, a world where all travelers, regardless of race, condition, or circumstance, could claim their rightful seat at the window or anywhere else they chose. Thank you for journeying with us through Ebony Johnson's emotional roller coaster, a story that began with a denied window seat and ultimately brought an airline to its knees, forcing real change. If Ebony's unwavering stand against unfair treatment despite her pregnancy and the challenges she faced resonated with you, please let us know by hitting that like button. If you believe more people should hear about stories that expose injustice yet inspire hope, share this video across your social platforms. And if you want to be part of our growing community, subscribing to this channel ensures you won't miss future stories of resilience, courage, and the triumph of the human spirit. Let's continue shining a light on the issues that matter and championing the voices that must be heard. Together, we can create a world where justice, dignity, and compassion greet every traveler, no matter who they are.